Good afternoon. My name is Clayton Kendall, and I'm here to present to you my in-process presentation, as a number of us have already done. And very broadly, my topic is adverse childhood experiences. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, does everybody kind of remember going through the lecture on that and doing the questionnaire? Okay, so really just to give you the actual definition of adverse childhood experiences. They're experiences occurring before the age of 18, which include, but are not conceptually limited to, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, emotional or physical neglect, domestic violence in the household, members abusing alcohol or drugs, having mental illnesses, separation or divorce between the parents, or one or more, obviously, exhibiting criminal tendencies. That is according to the World Health Organization, an article by Kessler and a number of other authors. So really this was, now I'll go into my story, why it's really important to me. When I was 8, my parents got divorced, so there is one adverse childhood experience. When I was 12, I had to move in with my dad because there was some possibility that my mother was mentally ill with something called schizophrenia. It was believed that it might not have been safe for me to live with her. And then third, there's arguably some dependency on alcohol in my family. So I have an ACE score of 3, so it's been a big part of my life, and I really just wanted to see what those outcomes were. What kind of the effects would be on me, and to really establish the importance of this issue to you guys. Why should you care? According to the TED Talk that we saw by Nadine Burke-Harris, 67% of people have at least one adverse childhood experience. Another 37% have more than 2, and a total of 12.6% have more than 4. So in our society, it's pretty rampant, kind of, I guess. And these are all conclusions made on a Kaiser Permanente, which is a health maintenance organization, and CDC study conducted in the mid-90s. So really, if kind of looking at it, trying to develop a finite topic, really for myself, living in an industrialized, wealthy country, of kind of a middle-class family, and I have an ACE score of 3, kind of bringing in some of that privilege, I guess. What does it mean for children of lesser developed countries, children who are lesser fortunate, and really, where can I fill in the void for that international piece of the project? So in Googling kind of adverse childhood experience international scores, I came across something known as the ACE IQ, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences International Questionnaire. And basically, as you can probably guess, it measures the ACEs on an international scale and includes a number of more dynamics that we don't experience really at all. And one of those that I wanted to focus on was called Exposure to War and Collective Violence section. And what they kind of define that as is these experiences are to do with the collective violence, including wars, terrorism, ethnic or political conflict, and political conflict is not Donald Trump being elected president. Genocide, repression, disappearances, torture, and organized violent crime, according to the World Health Organization website this year. So really, the exposure to war and collective violence, there's unfortunately no better place to look than the Middle East. You have the Iranian Revolution in late 1970s, Iraq, Kuwait in the 90s, Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in the 80s, American entry to Iraq in 2003, sectarian conflicts between the Sunnis and the Shias, Syrian conflict now, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all of these things, how do those affect children, I guess, is really what I wanted to see, and they're clearly rampant in decades upon decades. So now with an established topic, I stumbled across really the UN resolution, United Nations A51306, which is probably the highlight of my research. It was a report to the Secretary General of the United Nations called The Impact of Armed Conflict on Children, and really just shows the imminent threat on children and how international organizations and kind of foreign aid can better assess, monitor, and negate those experiences on kids through social reintegration, refugee programs, education, so on and so forth. But really where I was kind of taken back was that this was kind of brought to the international organization in 1996. So that was 20 years ago. But we're still seeing, the immediate effects of war on just really through the media is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. The effects on kids, like this picture, I'm sure that probably all of us just about saw this picture from the Syrian conflict over the summer. Things like that do go viral, but what about the total population in the last 20 years? This is just one instance. So we really haven't seen much. And really after all this, just kind of get down into what are the potential outcomes. At home, kids, I guess, with 4 or more ACEs are 12 times more likely to develop suicidal tendencies, 4.5 times more likely to develop depressive disorders, 58% more likely to smoke, 15% more likely to develop alcoholism, and 9% more likely to have multiple sex partners and acquire STDs. So that is 4 or more, but me being at 3, that's like, wow, these are only some of the potential health outcomes. And so really just kind of cut me intrigued, and those are both taken from Nadine Burke-Harris's research and Shanta Dubey from 2003 article. And then abroad, not only do they have those outcomes, but also things such as malnutrition, ill health, and lack of education, because they are, as Claudia Catani, in a study of a sample of school children in Kabul, Afghanistan, she said that they are, a particularly vulnerable group, as they have not only the direct consequences of war, but also those indirect consequences. So really, kind of what have been outlined as the solutions. The first is education, and a number of scholars, including one in an article, Adverse Childhood Experiences and How Schools Can Help, identify that school personnel are most likely to be aware of these adverse events, so they can link kids and their parents to sources, programs to help. And then also on the international level, just revamping of refugee programs, which was a pretty common feedback that I got through the interviews with the international students, that kids are just being thrown into a different country, different culture, and expected to basically, I guess, feel better, really not have any outcome of the adversity. And so lastly, I want to leave you with a quote and a challenge from Barenbaum in 2004, an article called The Psychosocial Aspects of Children Exposed to War. She identified that children under wartime duress are largely a voiceless population whose rights and needs are often subordinate to those of soldiers and the necessities of war. So really the challenge is to look past those needs of soldiers and the necessities of war, and really kind of dwindle down into what the effects are on the populations, what the effects are on children, what the effects are on the education system, infrastructure, so on and so forth, rather than the political ramifications of war. Thank you all for listening, and list of my sources.